So my form of government is socialism.
Louder.
Okay, socialist practices have been around since the biblical era, but the idea was kind of formally thought up in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, and it really became popular during the Industrial Revolution because of workers in factories kind of thought that this would be a type of government that would have a more equal distribution of wealth, because during that time factory owners were making an enormous amount of money more than their workers were. So socialism was an ideology that would maybe create a little bit more equal distribution of wealth. So what is socialism? It's an economic system where everybody in society has an equal share in the factors of production, which are labor, entrepreneurship, capital goods, and natural resources. So socialist governments are elected the same way that ours are. It's a democratically elected government, and it considers the needs of the entire group, as in the entire society, over those of just the individual. So there are benefits and disadvantages to socialism. The benefits are that workers aren't exploited because everybody has an equal share of the production. Nobody is being, conned. Everybody's working towards the same good. So if production is lacking, then everybody is losing out, and if production is increased, everybody is gaining from that. And then furthermore, profits are equally distributed according to significance of contribution. So socialism doesn't mean that everybody makes the exact same amount of money. Your amount of contribution does give you a higher salary. So people who are like workers will still make less than the owners of factories, but it won't be so unequal that workers aren't able to make a living wage. Furthermore, people who have like less desirable jobs, such as like garbage collectors, they're compensated for like how bad their job is. They get paid more money because less people want to do that work. And then lastly, poverty is eliminated because everybody has equal access to healthcare and education, everybody has equal opportunities, and everybody is making a wage that is fair and livable. But there are also disadvantages to socialism. So one is that it relies on cooperation between people, which is kind of against human nature. The natural instinct of a human is to do whatever it is to best benefit them and their families. So socialism kind of depends on every member of society to care about the future and like the well-being of the entire society, not just themselves. Furthermore, socialism doesn't really encourage innovation the same way that capitalism does, because in capitalism everybody's competitive and everybody wants to do what it takes to make the most amount of money. People are encouraged to come up with ideas that will really stimulate economic growth, whereas in socialism everybody is making a similar amount of money and you're kind of guaranteed a job whether you come up with a new stimulating idea or not. So socialism doesn't really encourage innovation the same way that capitalism does. And lastly, socialism relies heavily on a centralized government. Because socialism really depends on the well-being of the entire society, the government needs to be really strong and has a lot of power, which leads to a lot of corruption. Leaders have a lot of power, so if they decide to take advantage of that power and make the government into a tyranny or a dictatorship, there isn't a lot of leeway for the people to stop that. And then, so one famous socialist novel is The Animal Farm. The Animal Farm is based off of the Russian Revolution of 1917. It basically talks about these animals who rebel against their human owner and try and create a government of just the animals amongst themselves, as they try and kind of reap all of the benefits of the work that they're producing. But in the story, the pigs, who are kind of the smartest animals of the farm, they become the centralized government and they start taking more and more powers for themselves, and by the end of the novel they become just like the humans that they were trying to overthrow. They have had all the power and the other animals in the farm are completely under their oppression. So some nations...
Hold on, how does that, how is it an allegory of the revolution?
Well, in the Russian Revolution there were czars, and the czars, well, there's actually Okay, well, there were czars, and they basically had complete control over their people, and although they weren't really producing any work or doing anything to stimulate the economy of their country, they were reaping the most benefits from the work being produced by the farmers of Russia. So when the Russians overthrew the czars, they thought that they would create a government that was more centralized and that everybody would have a more equal distribution of the wealth. But the leaders who arose during the Russian Revolution, they ended up becoming just like the czars, who were taking so much from the farmers and leaving so little for them, even though the leaders really weren't doing to stimulate the economy of the country.
So it is a socialistic kind of principle. So what happens? Why did they become more powerful? Why didn't it not become a communist country later on? I mean, why was it not replaced by communism?
Why was it not replaced by communism?
Mm-hmm.
Is what you're asking, why did they become so powerful, and why did it not stay in equal distribution of wealth?
No, actually, you were right. The novel is a allegory, and it does talk about it mirrors the Russian Revolution. But after a while, the animals that take over power, they represent the socialistic form of government. After which, once a government is replaced, it's a replacement government. The socialism is a replacement government. It is supposed to dissolve and give way to communism, but that didn't happen because the political the bureaucracy was so powerful and it became corrupt after that. That's the
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying. So basically, the government was essentially supposed to kind of dissolve, and the people were supposed to be able to govern themselves.
Mhm.
But what happened is, it's kind of what we talked about before. People are always looking for their own personal gain. So the leaders who were in this, centralized government, they decided to take more and more power for themselves, which is what human nature is all about. And they ended up, creating this government with so much power that they wouldn't give it up. So nations who use socialism, there's really no nation currently that uses just socialism. Most governments have kind of a mix in governing systems, so they'll have a mix of socialism and communism, or socialism and capitalism. But the nations in the picture have at one point have either currently or at one point called themselves socialist or partly socialist, and then the key shows for how many years they've called themselves